This documentary will be about the forgotten technique of growing stone, rock, in the same way as we cultivate plants, and mushrooms in particular. Are these footsteps left in the soft stone? Do you notice this crisp edge here? It reveals how this stone was formed. It wasn't a lava flow, it was growing from below, rising pretty much as a dough does. Is this rock glue? Initially, I started my inquiry into this field because I was looking for an answer to the question, how were the Megaliths built? The Megaliths are a curious group of structures which many consider to be intelligently made megaliths. Actually, their general appearance is definitely that of natural stone formations, but with one small detail. Here and there are parts, tiny small parts of them, which don't look natural at all, even to geologists. After I made myself familiar with the absolutely brilliant research of Anthony Aksenov, not only the origin of the Megaliths became crystal clear, but a couple of other mysteries also got resolved, like for example the Seda stones. Sometimes they are described as defying the laws of physics. No, they don't defy any laws at all. They defy our assumptions of what those laws could be. Other mysteries for which I finally found explanation are curious formations like the Devil's Tower in Wyoming, the split rocks, which leave the impression as if they have been cut with some sort of a precision instrument, artifacts found in stone which, when put under tests, shows to be millions of years old, yet look at the year of manufacturing of this coin. And last, but obviously not least, an entire chapter of the most amazing story of the creation of our planet revealed itself for me. Even though I always knew that only a supreme consciousness can fashion such an amazing world and engineer such complex structures, still the actual details of how the Earth was engineered and how the project was carried out remained somewhat misty. Now, the truth about the details of how our Earth, including us, was engineered and made by the Creator is emerging again.
The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 aye,
The purpose of this documentary is not to convince you that some unknown aliens have come to create all the mysterious objects and structures, but to show you that the forces of nature themselves are intelligent beings, pretty much like me and you. Now let's start with relatively simple looking species of stone. Officially they are called Concretions. Although the process of formation, even of the simplest concretions, is not yet properly understood by official science, still, of course, this doesn't prevent them from confidently assuring us on TV and in textbooks that once upon a time lived a cute small snail, and then he died, and then around his house clay or other matter got stuck, accumulated, and that's how these balls formed. In reality, the concretions are much more complex creation than simply a dust which stuck to the house of the cute small snail. And it's not just the very complex internal structure, also, they tend to kind of spill out of their form, the globular form, to the point that they kind of fill up the entire space around themselves. And we are not talking about some rare exotic examples here. These are sites which are easily to be found all over the world by dozens. And not only these stones look as if they have been made of a dough that has risen, but also at other places it looks as if dough that has not yet risen has been inserted in some sort of skeleton or mesh or grid, and the soft dough tries to preserve this shape of globular circular growth within the boundaries of the cell. Now let's see what has the official science discovered about this type of rocks.
Orbicules are found in igneous, metamorphic, and megmatitic terrains, and are not restricted to unusual or limited compositions. Hypotheses of orbicule genesis include both magmatic and metamorphic origins for these rocks. However, no single hypothesis provides a general explanation. Some orbicule shells result from exchange of material between core and matrix. No correlation has been demonstrated between orbicule structure, chemical composition, or gross geologic setting. No single hypothesis provides a general explanation.
Okay, no hypothesis provides explanation. That in simple words means they have no clue. I say they don't want to have a clue. The clue is right in front of their eyes, but they don't want to see it because then it will become evident that many other of the so-called proven laws of nature that they have been telling us fairy tales about were simply wrong assumptions. I'm just trying to be polite. Actually, most of them were intentional lies. And as far as these interesting stones that I've been showing you, they're alive and they grow. And the proof of that are not only the countless similarities between the looks of the stones and various species from the plant kingdom, but also we have living example of species of stone, and these are the Trabant stones of Romania. Just look at them. What is the difference between them and the other stones that I've been showing you so far? There is no difference at all, just the Trabants are fast growing. The other stones might be simply growing slower, or they might have reached maturity. Maybe some different type of yeast, so to say, has been used in the case of the stones which appear not to grow. Appear doesn't mean they don't really grow, but maybe we simply can't notice it or don't want to notice it. So what is the mainstream explanation for the Trabant stones, or the TV explanation? Well, they're made of some special thing inside that is so dense that when you water it, it expands. But this Concretion thinks that this is calm explanation because the Trabants reproduce as well. In a couple of years, small pieces of them fall apart, and then those babies continue to grow and become adult Trabants themselves. In a certain mountain region of China, they also have rocks which produce flower-like blossoms, also made out of rock. Locals say that the flowers last about 2 years. Actually, the very idea that a lot of the rocks around us have grown pretty much like plants shouldn't be even surprising to anybody, for the simple reason that rocks consist of minerals, and minerals, they grow. In just a couple of days, anybody can grow absolutely beautiful and amazing minerals at home, and all one needs are basic substances which are very easy to find and get. Not only minerals grow, but just have a look in what kind of shapes do they grow. The very same shapes of the stones I've been showing you previously. Actually, after all this, it would be strange if the stones didn't grow, and not that I'm suggesting that they grow. Sometimes even mainstream sources refer to certain minerals as being alive. This is a marine creature, yet another candidate for a living stone. A couple of minutes ago, I used a rising dough as a comparison. And it seems that's exactly how entire hills and mountains were grown. Do you notice how certain segments fermented, so to say, much better? This cannot be a result of, let's say, a lava flow, because if that was the case, then the bulges would follow the flow of lava, while here we can clearly see that they are connected with the grid and not with an imaginary flow of lava. It looks as if the more fragile or maybe even soft substance was supported by a stronger mesh or grid. We don't know yet which came first, or did they grow together? And here is your hill. It's ready.
Here, the mixture didn't rise well. Or another possible scenario is that it eroded to expose the grid.
Just notice how the mini loaves of bread are rising, while they retain the sides, the sharp, crisp edges that they had before they came out of the mold or the grid. I think on this spot they might have put a little bit too much yeast.
And again, compare with the minerals which use the same support structure to grow.
And this is stone art in the real sense of the word.
But a growing substance that rises supported by a grid wasn't the only option. There also grow rocks, stone, mountains, as mushrooms. As the cluster of mushrooms used to multiply, eventually they would fill up the full space. This is the famous Cappadocium. Officially, it is considered that these protrusions, mushroom-like protrusions, are just results of ordinary erosion. Namely, the cap that survived kind of protected the layers below, And that's why the layers below didn't get carried away by the elements as everything else around in that layer. That is the official version. But if you take a look at this portion of the photograph, you will see how the mushrooms emerged with their mushroom shape already clearly visible as the erosion advances on the slope. Although eventually everything was overgrown, still the stems remained stronger and continued standing, having of course a higher density.
And as you look at the examples of mushroom stones that I'm gonna show you, don't disregard them just because, hey, not everything that looks similar is the same. Remember that not only the huge stone mushrooms look like the mushrooms in the forest, but also the minerals. They grow following exactly this very same pattern. All the minerals that you see are not shaped in this way by a jeweler. They grow in this form naturally. And the rocks are not only closely related to the minerals, they consist of minerals. Sometimes even the terms are used interchangeably. And now, keeping in mind everything you saw till now, have a new look at the Seda stones. Some people also call them balancing rocks. Well, actually, many and probably most of them are simply mushroom-like grown stones. And why they don't fall off? Well, for the same reason that the caps of the mushrooms in the forest don't fall from their stems. The heavy top part of the stone mushrooms could be supported by the so-called maybe stone fibers, or I'm not sure how to call them, which connect, that grow from the stem and go in the upper part of the mushroom. That could be the case with some of them. Yet others, which have their top part completely physically disconnected from the stem, they could be still supported by the energy grid on which the stone was cultivated. But it is possible that not all sedas are stone mushrooms. Some of them could be supported by magical spell or somebody's strong wish. These terms again can be used interchangeably here. Choose the one that better resonates with you. But even if magical spells were used to create the support for a given Seda, still In practical terms, at the end, the job would be carried out by creating a supporting energy structure, again in the form of some sort of grid, similar to the one which the original engineers of the stone mushroom colonies used. Now, I've been showing you lots of parallels between the structure of various stones which were grown and the structure of various plants. Now, I would like to point your attention to how Wikipedia explains these structural patterns. It labels them conveniently as a product of self-organization. And immediately they suggest something poetic to you, spontaneous. Wow. And now I want to show you something super cool and spontaneous. Did you know that if you put metal and plastic scrap in your washing machine and some salty water and rotate it long enough, eventually the scrap will self-organize itself into a beautiful smartphone with all the softwares already installed on it? And what's the proof that this can happen? The proof are the assurances of the penguins that the first living cell on Earth organized itself in the primeval salty soup. Of course, the penguins have tried many times experimenting to create even a single living cell and always failed. But still, they swear up and down it is possible. You simply haven't tried long enough. Not only the cell phone will self-organize itself in the washing machine, but even much more is possible, because even a single living cell is a much more complex system than a smartphone. And as far as real science, not the one preached on TV and in the schools, science based on what can be observed, till date, only intelligent conscious beings have been observed to be capable of designing and putting together complex systems.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems. The shameless lie that complex systems can organize themselves just like that, spontaneously, is a pivotal cornerstone of the belief system of the deceived modern man. It was very important for them to make the sheeple oblivious, unable to recognize the patterns which our benevolent Creator used in his matrix. In this way, they could install and impose another matrix, the matrix of evil, which does not overwrite the original matrix of goodness, but it simply feeds on it. It is a parasitic way of existence, and that's why all kinds of parasitic social structures sprout, as they say, spontaneously in our society. Actually, it is not spontaneous again, it simply replicates the patterns of the parasitic grid in which humanity collectively has decided to participate. And how exactly did they manage to introduce amongst the people this very important cornerstone lie that I mentioned? They did it with the help of very thick books which the common man can't understand due to the difficult terminology. And all that is described in these thick books are various experiments and mental speculations about how could have the primordial soup self-organized itself into these complex systems that we observe. Countless miles-long so-called scientific works are devoted on the question what kind of conditions were at that time so that they could have allowed or facilitated this self-organization. In this way, they waste people's time and energy into such useless topics instead of telling them straightforwardly. We have tried many times the experiment of placing the perfect ingredients in the most favorable and friendly environment and conditions, and they have never organized themselves even at the slightest to produce even a single living and growing cell.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems.
Only conscious beings can design complex systems. And that is why we see the intelligent watermark of our Creator on all levels. On the level that we can perceive directly, the stones were grown and they have grid and patterns of growth. And on macro level, on planetary level, again we see designs which are not spontaneous, as they call them. For example, the landscape below North America is very similar to that below South America. The full picture with the small islands, the straight line, everything. And now on the topic of split rocks. Certainly, some of them are divided in a way that doesn't have a natural feel to it. But that is only if we have a wrong concept of the nature of the stones as being alive and growing. For example, this is certainly a mushroom rock. We see the stems. And now see the split rocks from another perspective. The Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Certainly the most impressive example of the numerous stone structures of this type which are to be found all over the globe. So officially we are told that this is solidified lava. So has it been actually observed that the molten lava can form such structures, or they just assume that it might be able to do so and then sell it to us as if it is some sort of a proven fact? Because I think that the Devil's Tower actually grew like most other stones, and the grounds for that are the observations of how minerals grow. And the minerals, they are not just relatives of the rocks, they are not even brothers, they are the parents of the rocks. Don't you find it very obvious that since your parents grew from small children to adults, you would do the same? Now and then, during past life regressions, people remember previous lives of their souls in which they were minerals or rocks. And sometimes in those states of trance, they will find information on who and why grew the stones that we now call mountains or deposits. For example, this is how somebody who remembered his previous life as a rock described the human race from his perspective. For him, the human life was as a blink, as a short spark of light. The various civilizations which were coming and going from the face of the earth appeared also very transient to him, like lightnings. He would notice them for a moment and then they are gone. And as far as who was coordinating all this growing of the rock on our planet, well, of course, on a global level, that was a work of the planetary scale, nature spirits or nature gods. But on a more local level, it would be various keepers of the human race, or maybe somebody would call them local deities, or somebody else may find the term alien engineers more appropriate. And in some cases, even humans who were smart enough to be able to directly handle the subtle matrix of the original creator and manifest from it gross three-dimensional objects. Such people also participated in the creation of the rocks on Earth. For example, here we see ruins of the rock-cut cities, and in the vicinity this really looks like footprints in the soft, before I would say mud, but now I understand that soft young stone would be more appropriate. Do you also notice the typical bulging here? How the stone dough was rising? So I've been on 3 expeditions myself, and always this type of ruins were the main object of study, together with the vehicle tracks which are related to them. And it is now for the first time after I read the research of Anthony Aksenov that I can make some sense of it all. The footprints we saw earlier were in Turkey, and this is from the Italy expedition. At least the 2 places, there were similar tracks inside the Via Cavas. They most definitely resembled the pathway for a rather large human. And again, it definitely looked like the stone was somewhat soft when this track was made. Maybe the stone hasn't matured yet at that point. According to the source, which channeled information in trance, the rock-cut cities of Goreme and Cappadocia were constructed, so to say, by people who learned how to live together with the living stones. Maybe we could say that they domesticated the stones. Now, do you notice the white layer on the top of the rock-cut ruins? This is not snow. It looks as if somebody covered the ruins with some sort of foam. The same source explained that this was put together on the top, materialized, manifested from the ether by the keepers of the time, the keepers of the human civilizations later on, when these dwellings were no longer needed. He said they actually archived them because an entirely different civilizations were about to come and populate the earth, and they would need a different type of environment, stage for the theaters of their lives. And so this covering protective layer of archiving was manifested from the subtle plane, the subtle energies of the universe within a matter of hours, days, or a week, according to this source.
The concept of stone softening as a possible way the ancient megaliths were built is well known. So instead of always looking for a recipe or techniques which could have softened the stone, how about considering that it could have been manipulated while it was still soft, freshly grown, so to say? Or, most likely, first the grid was set in place, and then the stone was maturing by itself in the given shape. But this is only a hypothesis for now, and even if it is true, it will certainly apply only for some megaliths. But as far as the structures that we've been calling meltaliths, those are surely rocks which have been grown.
If you now watch again my couple of videos on the meltaliths, just turn off the sound and only watch the images, and you will see, usually at every meltalith site, multiple signs that we are talking about rock that has been grown, cultivated. Now, why exactly will be different for each and every case? Some of them could be indeed old ruins, I'm talking about the meltaliths. Others could be simply rock, part of the skin of Mother Earth. And it will look that it has intelligent design because everything has intelligent design anyway. At other locations where the rock structures look pretty crazy, those could be rock nurseries or kind of rock laboratories, testing places. And yet other category of meltaliths could be simply rock which has been grown with the idea to be harvested subsequently by mining. Much more about this particular point there will be in my next video. For example, here we have very regularly looking plates on the shore, and then the lake is also suspiciously regularly shaped with multiple right angles. And this is what we observe always with the meltaliths. Multiple unnatural features clustered together, like a type of stone which is alien to the area, then at places it looks molten, and then the cubes are very regular, and then the stones would display strange patterns, and all this is clustered together. Up until very recently, it looked hopeless for me to find explanation of all this taken together, although some features of the meltaliths could have natural explanation, but only taken separately. And now, with this new information from Anthony, everything falls in place, everything. And what is this? Some sort of stone glue? Nothing can surprise me anymore. And finally, when did we lose this knowledge? When did we forget how to grow and farm stones, rocks? I don't know the answer for now, but here are some relatively recent statues. And if they have been made using this technique of growing stones, the answer is very recently. It's not clear for now if that's the exact technique they used here. But still, I'm showing you the photographs for your own consideration. Now let's pay a visit to the goblins. Mushrooms everywhere. Now look at this particular mushroom here. At this point, it is still, so to say, built in the wall, in the solid rock, which has not yet eroded. And yet, it is a fully recognizable mushroom. Stone mushroom structure. And all those other mushrooms on the right side, they have this form not because the bedrock eroded in some funny fashion, but because they looked like this always. Even before the softer filling around them got washed away, or in some cases there might have been no solid filling around the mushrooms as well. And here again, look at the bedrock, at the background, fully recognizable mushrooms. And here they have even dots on their heads, really like the plant mushrooms in the forest. But the actual reason for which I brought you here at the place of the goblins is because I want you to see how this colony of mushrooms looks on macro level. So even on macro level, it looks like a plant, like something living. Usually in such cases, the geologists start telling us stories that you see there was once upon a time a big spill of something liquid which solidified in this fashion. Really, did it spill indeed? What was it? I see no source of such liquid whatsoever.
So now, with this new information about how lots of the rock on Earth is formed, many of the mysteries, so-called mysteries, get solved, like objects which look recent are found inside rocks. And when you test them in the laboratory, show the ages of millions of years.
Actually, the modern geology knows very little about stone. Here is a petrified lake in a pretty much modern shoe, cowboy boot. Now, how much of the stone on Earth was cultivated and how much of it has other origin?
Geologists have defined 3 environments in which rocks form. 1. Igneous. Igneous rocks form as molten rock cools and solidifies. 2 sub-environments are distinguished. A. Underground, magma, and B. On the surface, lava. Number 2. Sedimentary. Sedimentary rocks form as grains of sediment are attached to each other by a cement or by the interlocking of grains. And 3. Metamorphic. Metamorphic rocks form as pre-existing rocks respond to a radical change in environment, most commonly an increase in temperature, pressure, and/or an infusion of hot mineralized fluids. Fact or fiction? It's important to note that in general, these rock-forming processes and the environments in which they take place cannot be observed. Solidification of magma, most changes in temperature and pressure sufficient to cause metamorphism, and most processes that attach sediment grains to one another occur out of sight beneath the Earth's surface. They are, therefore, not observed facts, but hypotheses that geologists in the 18th and 19th centuries constructed to explain features of rocks that they examined. Exceptions include the eruption and cooling of lava to form rock, the transformation of snow to ice, and the formation of salt rock in evaporating saline lakes, such as the Dead Sea or the Great Salt Lake, all of which can be observed. Gradually, these hypotheses gained acceptance and became elevated to the status of theories. Today, they are accepted by all geologists. Our task is to examine the basis for this belief.
So when we put together all the information on cultivating rocks and the information gathered by the geologists, it turns out that probably most or all metamorphic rocks were grown, cultivated, and same would apply for some or all underground igneous rocks, as it was illustrated with the example of the Devil's Tower, and some, definitely not all, but some sedimentary rocks could have been also misunderstood by the modern geologists and could have been grown as well. Here is an example. So they're showing us photos like this and telling us, you see, this was bottom of a lake or ocean once upon a time, and as the sediments turned into stone, that's how all this was formed. Looks good, but only so far. But if we have a look of how the layers are stacked, then questions arise. Okay, this process that they're telling us of the body of water, the bottom of a body of water turning into stone, is a very lengthy process. So it means that for each and every layer displaying these particular patterns, there has been a separate process of forming it in such a way, which also, by the way, implies that the given body of water dried out. So what? Did we have like 40 lakes appearing one after another and then disappearing at very, very regular intervals of time to form all these layers? And there are quite few of these layers. On this image we see part of the structure that is still standing. It's made of these very same plates. And again, the stories that we are told of how the bottom of a body of water can turn into stone supposedly take ages and are not something that can happen within a season. Other unexplained structures, like the Eye of Sahara, may also find their explanation along the lines of the new information that we have about the cultivation of stone. The famous, mysterious, and again unexplained Potomsky crater also clearly exhibits the features of growing rock. And just look what kind of structures metals tend to form naturally. I think they begin to give us hints about their actual origin, which is probably very similar to that of the stones. The concept of growing our building materials is barely a new one. Discoveries have been made many years ago already. But of course, mass implementation of these discoveries will definitely not take place while we continue to live in the parasitic paradigm. These are one of the many inventions which will not reach most of the common people. It will not be allowed just because it will make our lives much easier. And then people will have time to think and they will have the ability to come out of the hamster wheel of being obliged to work like a donkey all your life if you wish to be part of the modern society. People don't even realize that it is exactly this fear that keeps them anchored in their slavery. Actually, if we want our society to return to normal, most of us will be losing our jobs, and this will be a good sign because most of the work will be done in a much more efficient way. We have already all the discoveries that we need. We have the star batteries that I have discussed in earlier videos. That means very, very cheap and almost free energy as much as we wish. We also have solar cars. The commercial models should have been manufactured already many years ago, but of course magically it didn't happen. Even the hybrid bike here in Japan, which is electric but also uses the power of magnets and uses minimal fuel. Also, the company which started manufacturing it somehow disappeared as well. And so people are back to the hamster wheel. Why? Because the television, the tell-lie vision, convinces them every minute that having a job equals leading a better life. The better life will come when most of us don't have jobs. And this is a good illustration of another pivotal and cornerstone lie that the mass media has implanted in the society. We are not to blame. The truth is, we are the only ones to blame. It is very much a matter of personal choice. Do we decide to reside in the paradigm, in the matrix of the benevolent creator, or in the matrix of the parasites? It is essential for the parasitic forces to convince us that we don't have any choice but to stick to them just to remain alive. And it is not at all by chance that the visionary magical plants used by our forefathers, who were free by the way, are now by chance mistakenly put in the same category as harmful drugs, which also exist, and thus the visionary plant teachers are declared illegal. It is not by chance that they offer decades of time in prison for those who use the visionary plants. That is indeed an extreme danger to the parasitic paradigm, the parasitic matrix, because the visionary plant teachers directly clean the malevolent software programs from the people who come in touch with them. The malevolent software programs installed in us, in our psyche, by the mass media and the society infected by this mass media. And keeping us blind about so many things is a prime tool used by these parasitic, malevolent pieces of software. And we have reached such a deep bottom of ignorance that the so called scientists, glorified on TV and so on, usually will tell you much less about the true matrix of the creator and how things are than certain artists who, from their hearts, will feel better the benevolent matrix of the creator and will recognize its patterns. As our desire to know more and experience how does it feel to live in the matrix of the creator grows, proportionally to that, the grip of the parasitic paradigm will get weaker.